Close your eyes and feel the atoms glow.
Using a mix of the most powerful radiation-based weapons and armour in the game, Atom's Chosen will eliminate any non-believers who refuse to see that the path of Atom is the only true path. This build really comes alive whilst fighting in radiation, making him smarter, stronger, and more resilient. A strength of 5 allows you to use melee as an effective combat skill, and will get us to heavy guns, making them a viable secondary class of weaponry. Perception isn't necessary for this build. In general, you won't be using that, and the high accuracy isn't needed all that much. Just hold down the trigger and you will eventually hit what you're aiming at. You're an absolute beast in combat, and the main reason for this is that you've got an endurance of 9. This lets you make most fights a battle of attrition. Even if your opponent has better weapons than you, chances are you can simply absorb more bullets than them and stay standing. Atom's Chosen is definitely not a charismatic guy. Whenever someone talks to him, they can tell something isn't quite right in his head. You won't be getting across your message with words, so weapons will have to do instead. Despite being batshit crazy, Atom's Chosen is surprisingly intelligent. He is able to look at almost any device and immediately know how it works and how useful it will be to him for spreading the word of Atom. High intelligence makes this character level really fast, and means you will be able to get into Far Harbor without having to spend hour after hour grinding for XP. Agility and luck are both at 2, so we can have access to the Commando and Scrounger perks. Atom's Chosen isn't agile, and most definitely isn't blessed with good luck. The essential perks for this build are Commando, Big Leagues, Nuclear Physicist, Gun Nut, Science, Armourer, and Inquisitor of Atom. Commando and Big Leagues give you 2 different weapon classes to use straight from the get-go, and will ensure you can rapidly take down anyone who stands in your way. Nuclear Physicist is ideal for this build, as it will increase your radiation damage, turning your radioactive weaponry from being a sort of gimmicky weapon effect into something that can seriously damage your enemies. Gun Nut, Science, and Armourer are all for modifying your weapons and armour. You will really struggle to upgrade both your weapons and your armour to a playable level through taking mods off of other versions of them, meaning you have to craft them yourself to reliably use them. Inquisitor of Atom is a perk that you will not have to spend a perk point to get, but instead is the reward you will gain from serving Atom faithfully in Far Harbor. This perk will increase your weapon damage as your rads increase, making it the perfect perk for this rad-loving build. The secondary perks of this build are Blacksmith, Heavy Gunner, Scrounger, and Medic. Blacksmith will help you upgrade your melee weapons, which are an important part of this build, but unlike the other crafting perks, this one isn't essential, as you can fairly reliably find modded versions of your main melee weapon to strip the mods off of, instead of crafting them yourself. Heavy Gunner will give you another category of weapons that you can use effectively, but I found myself only needing heavy guns in very special circumstances, such as when fighting monstrous enemies like the Behemoths and My Alert Queens. Scrounger is a very useful perk, as it will keep you topped up on ammo without having to barter with vendors too often, something which you want to be avoiding as much as possible with this incredibly uncharismatic character. Medic is going to amplify the tankiness of this build. The main reason that this isn't an essential perk is that often you will not want to remove too many of your rads, so I would advise only getting a rank or 2 of this perk at most. There is only one role-playing perk, and that is Ghoulish. Ghoulish will give you a health regeneration when you're being irradiated, and will also occasionally make feral ghouls friendly. If it wasn't for the fact that this is a very situational perk, then this would be an essential perk for the build. As it is, the perk's just not all that powerful most of the time, so it's just one to add for the purpose of making this character closer to Atom. Atom's Chosen lived a normal life before the day the bombs fell. He had a steady job, a loving wife, and a quaint suburban house. He ended up having to serve in the Resource War, and about a year after his return to civilian life, he and his wife had a son together. In all honesty, the only vaguely interesting thing about Atom's Chosen before the day the bombs fell was that he was a devout Christian and tried to follow the teachings of the Bible to the best of his abilities, even avoiding fighting during the war whenever he could. The real change that happened to Atom's Chosen was when he was rushed to Vault 111 after the bombs started falling. He witnessed millions dying in nuclear fire that was raining from the sky. As he was being lowered into the vault, the only thing he could think about was how could his god allow this to happen? The bombs were falling from the sky itself as if God was dropping them onto the world. Atom's Chosen was barely able to keep his sanity intact as he was led into a decontamination pod. As the freezing cold rushed over him, his heart was filled with a fiery anger for what had just happened. What finally sent his mind down the path of insanity forever was seeing his wife shot and his son stolen from him whilst he was powerless to do anything. When he is finally freed from cryostasis, Atom's Chosen is a broken man who no longer understands the world around him. He will mindlessly wander until he encounters the children of Atom. When he does, he will find himself a new god, one more suited to this new radioactive wasteland he has found himself in. Atom's Chosen doesn't care about the factions in the slightest. None of their goals are ones that he cares about. In general, I would suggest avoiding factions and focusing more on the Far Harbor DLC. This build is based more around playing this than the main game. Obviously you will want to join the Children of Atom officially once you do get to Far Harbor and complete their questline doing whatever the High Confessor asks of you. If you do need to join a faction in the main game, then I would suggest the Minutemen, as they don't have any strong goals besides helping people and getting people to join the Minutemen. You can always roleplay that you are secretly converting members of the Minutemen to the worship of Atom, and this can be your reasoning for joining and then leading them. Unfortunately, there isn't a specific Child of Atom companion. If you do want to have a companion with you, then I would suggest Strong. Atom's Chosen may look upon him as having received a blessing from Atom, as he isn't affected by radiation. I personally didn't play with a companion for most of my playtesting, as none of them really seemed that worthwhile having. In terms of weapons, you will want Atom's Judgment, Big Boy, the Kiloton Radium Rifle, and Radical Conversion. In addition, get yourself a gamma gun and make it automatic. Also keep an eye out for any legendary weapons that deal radiation damage. Your automatic weapons will give you great DPS, letting you deal with most enemies very quickly. If you ever need to conserve ammo, then switch to Atom's Judgment. You have a decent strength stat, which means you can feasibly use melee, but more importantly, Atom's Judgment does an absolute ton of radiation damage, which is then boosted by Nuclear Physicist, which can often deal with enemies better than the standard damage can. You do struggle more whilst fighting enemies with very high radiation resistances, but both of your radium rifles are able to deal with most enemies without having to rely just on their radiation damage. The Kiloton Radium Rifle is particularly great, as it has the explosive legendary effect, meaning you don't have to worry about enemies hiding in cover from you. If you do go up against a very powerful enemy, or group of enemies, then make sure to pull out Big Boy and prove to them that size really does matter. When you head into combat, you will want to wear Atom's Bulwark, the Recon Marine left and right arm, and Marine armour on both legs. You will want to make all of this Inquisitor's Marine armour to give it some great defensive stats and an amazing look. Before you can make all the pieces Inquisitor's armour, simply make it Zealots, as this doesn't require level 4 of Science and Armourer. Atom's Bulwark is your big defensive point of this armour, as it will give you increasing resistances as you get irradiated, making you insanely tough whilst you're well into the red on rads. You will also want the Inquisitor's Cowl, which increases your intelligence, making you level incredibly quickly. Underneath all of this, wear the Marine Wetsuit, which will give you small bonuses to all your resistances. Whilst outside of combat situations, wear the Robes of Atom's Devoted. This will give you decent radiation resistance, but more importantly suits the aesthetic of this character. It also stops you constantly walking around in full combat armour, which often looks really out of place when you're just talking to people. Make sure to equip the Inquisitor's Cowl before you turn any quests in order to get the maximum XP that you can. This build is basically a really aggressive tank. High endurance and good armour means that you can take a lot of hits, and then just casually eliminate your enemies. Outside of combat, you want to act fairly unhinged. Vary your dialogue options between acting nice and being harsh or rude, and always try to promote violence when the choice arrives if it's between non-believers. If you decide that an individual definitely wouldn't be worthy of becoming a Child of Atom, or couldn't be convinced to become one, then don't hesitate to kill them. I had a lot of fun having normal conversations with NPCs, and then just backing out of the conversation and murdering them. It gives the build a real fanatical feel. Thank you very much for watching my latest build. As always, please like, comment, subscribe, and share this video. Really, the more views this gets, the more effort I can keep on putting into these so that we can get better quality content on this channel for all of you guys. I hope you have a great week, and I'll see you same time next week for the next week's build.